Okay, welcome to the podcast episode with Ezekiel, Accomplishing Dreams. I'm very excited to talk to you today because I have been following you actually for quite a while, and you followed me back very quickly, which I also appreciate. And the main reason is that, I think that there is a lot of advice out there these days for how to dungeon master the skill, the art of it. And one of the things that stood out for me with you is that you say things that are one very obviously useful and very worth considering, even if you disagree with it. But the main thing is that it's always very easy to remember and apply to at the table. So I thought we could go in and maybe tailor our conversation to anyone who is familiar with Dungeons and Dragons or any other TTRPGs, and they want to get into dungeon mastering for the first time. And I don't think it even needs to be specifically D&D. It could be, there's Dagger Heart out there, there's all these other systems, and a lot of the skills transfer. Most of the skills transfer, probably. So before we get into that, I'd like to know how you first got into Dungeons and Dragons TTRPG. What intrigued you, and what is the reason you keep coming back?
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic. What an awesome opportunity. So thank you so much for inviting me on. I started DMing my very first ever session. I was 15. It was 2014. I believe the fifth edition had just come out, and my brother and a couple of his friends wanted to play. So I watched PAX East, PAX
Um,
West with Chris
yeah,
Perkins when he was
right.
DMing for
Yeah,
the
he's
two
great.
people who run it, and of course I think Patrick Rothfuss was on there, and Will Wheaton was on there at one point. And
Right.
so
Oh
and
yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
that's
I
right.
just watched all of that, so
Acquisition.
I figured out how, you know like how you could just DM a session, uh
Hmm.
and that was prior to Critical Role coming out. Like that
Right.
was that was way before, and I think they were even playing a previous edition. Besides that, day of first session, 4 people turned into about 8 or 9 people. I can't quite remember, but
Whoa.
that was tough for first time person, and for first
Yeah.
time DM, and first time everyone was a first time player, so it was very difficult. But we
Yeah.
ran through it. It was a complete mess, but it was so fun, and I've been
Yeah. All
DMing
right.
ever since.
I think we forget that even when it's a mess, it's fun. It's better than doing other things, right? Like
Absolutely,
it doesn't
that's
matter
the
how
love of the
bad it is.
hobby.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, okay, so wait a second. To clarify, then, the first time you played, you were a DM.
Yes. And I've been a
Wow.
I've been a forever DM ever since. My brother, my oldest I have 2 older brothers. My oldest brother, I was in Connecticut with him, looking around at the time, and he's 10 years older than I am. So, he's like 24, I'm 14 or something like that. And, he's taken me through Barnes and Noble, and, he's like, "Hey, you know what? I think you would enjoy D&D," because he used to play back in high school. And
Mhm.
I was like, "Yeah, really?" He said, "Yeah, I mean, you love storytelling. You love writing down, like, little stories and stuff. I think you'd be great at that." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, man." And so, we tried to put it together, a little bit later, 3.5, something that he already had known. That kind of fell through. And, then my other brother, our middle brother, wanted to play 5th edition because it had just come out. So,
Mhm.
there's that story.
There you go. And that
Mhm.
was it. So, how long? Let me see. How often do you play now? Is it every week, once, or three times? I got to know. It must be like
So,
three times a week, right, or more?
it is just about 3 times a week, but
Yeah.
there was a time, when I was DMing about 9 times a week, or
Whoa.
around 9 times on a biweekly schedule. The reason being is I used to work at a game and hobby store.
Oh, there you go.
So, and I was the resident DM. There were other dungeon masters, but because I was on the payroll, I was the one that was DMing a lot of the sessions, and a lot of those groups, there was a need prior to this was actually this was during COVID, just after
Right.
lockdown had ended, And so people
Right.
were looking to jump back in. I was brought on board, and I was already DMing prior to that. But because there was this big need to get back in, and there were a few DMs, I ended up running for, 8 people per session just about, and it was a rotation. There were some people that could make it. So, I think the roster was about 10 people per group, but only
Mm.
about 8 people on a rotation could make it,
Right.
and so you had to be super flexible and run things improvisationally even more so because the schedules like that were so
Right.
different, and you
Yeah.
never knew who exactly you would get, and so that's my background. I was doing that for about 2, maybe 3 years,
Mm.
and then I finally moved on from that and got a big boy job, but a lot of those sessions, sort of I had to get rid of them, and I've slowly replaced them and regained more over time. So there's actually 4 groups that I'm in, not 3, I lied. There's 2 where I'm a player and 2
Mhm.
where I'm DMing.
There you go.
One has been my original group, since 2017. Um, and
Wow.
it's still on a
Yeah.
bi-weekly Wednesday schedule. So every other Wednesday we play, we go. It's at the same store where I used to work. And I've been DMing there since before I used to work there.
Are they the same characters? I mean, are they like level 20?
No, no, they are not the same characters,
Okay.
and as is the way with a lot of groups, some of the people have left and we've regained more. And that's
Mm.
something that we could also possibly talk about too, which
Oh,
is
for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
your group as well, because that group I've cultivated over a very long period of time. So
Yeah, we
everyone
need yeah.
there is like my vibe, you know?
This is great. Okay. So yeah, I just an observation here is that
Mm,
I tend to I think that the people that I have found and connected with on social media, other dungeon masters, very often are people who saw something like acquisitions, incorporated, or critical role, or whatever,
mhm,
and then got into the game. And they mostly started with fifth edition, not fourth, not third. Some of it is a matter of time, but it's very interesting from my perspective because I came from a time when there's no social media of any kind. The idea of a celebrity dungeon master was just completely unthinkable. It was just you and your friends in a book, and you were guessing the right way to DM, or if there even was a right way to DM, and you would move to another place and you would go to another table, and the dungeon master's approach was completely different. In some places, everyone would act out their characters, and some people would play it like a board game. And your character, you wouldn't even have a name. Your character would be the elf, right? Like you wouldn't
mhm.
even be like a real,
Yeah,
like a backstory. What is that? So it's very interesting to see this evolution where it's not like, I think I said it incorrectly. There's not a right way to play, but there are definitely best practices that have emerged. And I think it's been a good thing. I'm not being nostalgic about it. I think the state of the game is actually in many ways is better than it's ever been because we can look at other people as a model, and we can share our ideas.
oh
And I
yeah,
think it's great. And so I
absolutely.
think you're kind of this new generation of tabletop role players. And I think it's great. I think where we're going with the game is has been nothing but good, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. The Critical Role, Dimension 20, and I think its predecessor, which I do believe is the recordings of PAX,
Right.
because people would actually show up live for that event, right?
Right.
That was
Yeah.
the event at PAX,
Right.
um, and I think those really changed the game. Not in the way that maybe didn't change the game, the
Right.
rules changed the game, the new additions changed the game, but it changed the game in terms of being a dungeon master. I think to your point, it allowed everyone to sort of look at what other people were doing and go, "Ah, I like that." And it sort of standardized what it meant to be a dungeon master
Right.
and gave everyone that baseline
That's
foundation
right.
of
Yeah.
where to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, let's imagine this then. Let's say we're in a situation where someone has been watching Critical Role, Dimension 20, whatever for a while. They want to jump in. They've they're they've got people who want to play. They're going to dungeon master for the first time, and they turn to
Mm.
you and they say, "Ezekiel, what do I do? I'm going to be playing next week.
So
I have four players."
you have four. Well, that's a good amount. That's probably the perfect amount.
That's why I
Um,
said I thought I'd make it a
yeah,
little bit
right.
easy.
Exactly. That's the perfect amount. Let's see here. They've watched. So what's funny is that I used to run at the store where I worked. I used to run a new dungeon master workshop. So I would always help new DMs bring into the fold, and so they had a lot of questions. Very similar, which is where do I start? And you said that their baseline was that they already watched sort of Dimension 20 or
Yeah,
Critical Role.
yeah,
And the first thing that I would remind those new dungeon masters is that you are not Matt Mercer, you are not Brennan Lee Mulligan, and they would not want you to be. I think
right.
I've even seen them talk to like, don't be us,
Yeah,
like
that's right. They
be your own person, be your own
they
DM.
specifically
And
said that. Yeah.
yeah, and you can um uh you can borrow a lot from them, absolutely, but don't attempt to be something that you are not. Being a dungeon master first and foremost is, you are. I don't want to say like in control, not necessarily because it is a communal storytelling. Everyone has a say, but if you aren't being honest with yourself and honest at the table as to like who you are and what you want, not what you imagine it to be,
Mm,
then you're going to run into difficulties there. And make no mistake that those are staged. They're the idealized version of what
right.
D&D is. You're talking about these are people who are actors, comedians, voice actors that have been in that field for a long period of time, and the people that you DM for are not actors. They might not be comfortable with the type of
Mm,
role playing that you saw on camera.
mm.
And so keeping that in mind and almost, I hate to say it, but almost lowering the expectations
Yeah.
to a real sense, I think is,
Right.
and that was usually the first thing that I would
Right.
tell them. The second thing, um, I guess I would tell them is, um, I used to say run a one shot, just to see and test the waters. Uh, but I actually saw something very recently. Oh man, I forget the TikTok creator's name, but it was so good and I have to repeat it. So this isn't me, but this is someone else. Don't run a one shot, run like a three-parter,
Mm.
because a one
Yeah, I
shot
saw that. Oh, I
very
saw that too.
often,
Yeah.
yeah, very often devolves into 2 or 3 if you're not careful. So just
I have to look that
automatically
up.
having 3 sessions is very good.
Yeah.
And if you can plan for those 3 sessions in a very succinct sense, meaning that you have like, okay, this session, this is the goal of the session. Session 2, this is the goal of the session. Session 3, this is the goal of the session. Then, and so the climax of the plot and the resolution, it all wraps up. That I think that would be the second piece, is just make sure that you're kind of organized. And then also remember that things will go off the rails, but plan for that.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, so what's next? They've got a three shot. How would they approach it? How would they, are
How
they
would
gonna
they
are they gonna run a box set?
yeah.
Are they going to come up with it by themselves?
Mm. I am a big I have never run a module ever, not once. I completely homebrew all the sessions I talked about earlier. Every single one of those was a different campaign.
I'm exactly the same as you. In all the years I felt like I was missing something, and so a few
Mhm.
weeks ago I just started running Descent into Avernus, and it's the first
Yeah.
module I've ever run. And even then I found I have to tweak everything in it, like
Oh yeah, of
just to
course.
fit the players always.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I don't run modules, is because you have to adjust anyway. Now, there is good advice out there that if you use the module as a new dungeon master, it sets a framework for you as to how you can plan your own. But I find that some dungeon masters, new dungeon masters that I talked to previously, get into the trap of, well, I'm going to play this module. Oh, well, this was a good module. I'll play the next module, and then they become module players and module DMs, and they don't ever experience what it's like to like build a full world, or
Right.
and maybe I'm biased in that sense because that's what I enjoy doing. I don't
Yeah,
think
me too. Yeah, I'm the
yeah, I don't
same
think
way.
there's any. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if I have a chance to play Curse of Strahd as a player, I'm all in. I'm totally fine with that. It just I think as a dungeon master, I always end up changing, wanting to change it too much. To be like you said perfectly. It's basically the same amount of work ultimately if you have that creative inclination to build a world.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So okay, so
We've
we've got
got
your
the 3
players.
sessions. Yeah,
Do you
we
do
got 4.
do you do pre-gen characters, or do you let them make people
No,
make their own characters?
I let people make their own characters. I always tell them to help learn how to make a character so that you can help your other players, because if you're just DMing, part of the other side of that is knowing how other characters function. So that way, if you're dealing with new players as well, you can at least help them out and give them the baseline understanding, because you're the one that's doing all of the prep work. More than likely, if you're a new dungeon master, you were the one that got your group of reluctant friends together and said, "Hey, I want to try this. Are any of you interested?" And then someone like, "No," and then you just, let's play anyway, or something, something like
Right,
that. Or maybe they're gung ho about it, and but they're sitting down with an expectation of, oh, I'm just going to play. You
right.
as the dungeon master are sitting down with the expectations like, I also have to teach them how to play, which is why I always recommend having one veteran player at the table.
Mm.
If you're starting a group with new players, having a veteran player to help, so that the burden isn't solely on the DM to help. But if we're talking about totally new group, totally new players, um, having an understanding of the classes and how to construct a a character, I think
Yeah,
I think you need to do that.
yeah, that veteran player is always useful. I even now, like I've been through so many different editions now, but I play with my brother, and he reads the rules like crazy, and he remembers all of them like an encyclopedia. And so he'll, even though I'm DMing, he will be the one that reminds me of like what exactly is the grappling rule in this edition, and like he'll just and it's great to have him, and so we've now got a good back and forth. But he also is good at advising other players about which feats to take when they level up and things like that.
Mhm.
And it's great. The only risk you run, and my brother doesn't do this, but I can imagine that if you have a veteran player, making sure that they don't tell how to DM. And like there's this kind of like you've got a little bit of a weird vibe, especially if your experience level compared to that player. If you would run into that situation, how would you handle it, do you think?
If I ran into that situation, I'm usually on the opposite side, having to restrain myself, just because there are new dungeon masters who want me to play,
Right.
and that they get a little intimidated when I do. But I always try to keep my mouth shut when it comes to telling them what to do. If there's a ruling, of
Yeah.
course, I'll help them. Um, but if I think I would approach this the same way I would approach rules lawyers,
Mm.
right? In that, of course, the classic line of, "Well, we'll play it this way for now. This is my decision, and we're gonna play it this way." I think that's a very powerful sort of trick to that you can always have in your toolbox to whip out. If there's someone that's like, I don't think that's the way that works," or it's hard because if it is a ruling and it's in if it's a spell, for instance, always, should rely on that. But if, here's a good one. bonus action for drinking a potion. You
Yeah.
know, rules is written, I believe, 2014 edition. I don't know if they updated it in the new
I
edition,
can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember.
but it was an action to drink a potion and an action to
Right.
feed it to someone.
Right.
And if I was, I ran into that problem a lot where I was like, it's a bonus, it's a bonus action. People like, no, it's actually an action. It was like, no, I'm making this executive decision for XYZ reasons. And um so always have a reasoning behind it. You shouldn't have a willy-nilly thing that you just do. Have some sort of logic and reasoning behind the decision to support your answer, and then be like, "Drop the hammer. This is the decision."
This is you're right, and then just that, and then
Mhm.
that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Even if it's just a precursory justification for it, and then one thing that I'll always do too is after the session, if there was something that was bogging us down a little bit, we'll come to a consensus. A lot of times with
Mm,
my homebrew rules, I don't say this is the rule. I say let's discuss and what do we think that the rule should be for this group. And so I'll have one group that has a different set of homebrew rules or different rulings because they prefer it that way, and I'm fine with it. I'd
yeah.
rather, just like with a story collaboration, there's no reason you can't collaborate on the rule system either.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get into the adventure itself. So you've got, let's say it's a three shot because it's a brilliant idea. I totally agree with it. I saw that video and I can't remember who it is, and
I
we'll have
can't.
to look it up.
If you're the person and you're watching this,
Please, yeah, please tell us and claim
excellent
credit.
advice. Oh my god,
Right.
absolutely,
Please
absolutely
claim
incredible.
credit
Yeah,
to let me know, and we'll put the link here. Uh, but yeah, let's imagine. So let's imagine that. So it's a nice three act kind of situation.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
where how do you propose? How do you approach? Where do you
Plot,
start? Do you design the
perhaps.
villain?
So
Yeah, the plot craft, the adventure, the hook. Where
so
do you go?
I think it depends. When I ran the workshop, I would always ask where they wanted to start. And usually it was either they had an idea for a villain, or they had this theme, or they had this epic plot line that they want, or they wanted to copy a plot line or something, which is totally fine and nothing new under the sun. Um, but where I personally start is at the end, um, meaning that the climax, what's the villain doing, and what does he want, and how do they defeat him? How do they stop him or her? I think is a very good way of doing it, because if you think, all right, well, there's a dark evil wizard who has imprisoned this princess because he needs to sacrifice her to a demon god to gain ultimate power over the universe. All right, so there's your premise, right? Um, okay, well then the counter to that is you need to rescue the princess. It's not necessarily that you need to kill the villain. It's that you just need to rescue the princess, and that opens up. Well, okay, well you could interrupt the whatever sacrificial ritual, and kill the big bad evil guy, and rescue the princess at the same time, or you could do, and so now you've opened up multiple different ways to approach the problem, just as your players would do. And that's
Mhm.
one of the other things, is that you don't necessarily want to, you just want to create problems. You never want to solve the problems and expect that the players will do that thing.
Right. And players, even brand new players, will come up with solutions to things that you did not anticipate. There's no way to anticipate what a group is going to come
Mhm.
up with. The
Yeah.
best you can ever do is really just, present the scenario and see what they do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and and then I would work backwards from there in terms of, okay, well, that's session 3, is that you either rescue the princess or you defeat the evil wizard. Um and Session 2 would be getting there, and session 1 would be the plot hook, you know? The king has issued a bounty of 10,000 gold to rescue the princess from XYZ place. Um, and perhaps it's just a matter of getting there. Uh, and then it could be that the first session you could do a myriad of
Right.
things for that plot hook. But session 2 would be getting there, and then a problem occurs while trying to get there. And then session 1 is obviously the hook. Session 3 is finding the a lot of dungeon masters. Here's a good tip for every dungeon master out there. Most of the session, if you look at it, it's your players trying to figure out the problem. That's like 75% of the
Right.
game.
Always.
And
And
it's
then
just them.
just
It's if you keep your mouth shut, letting them figure out and talk is half the battle. It's more than half the battle.
always. That's most of the game. A lot of it's most of the time, and planning. How are we going to break into this castle? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? That's a big chunk of time. The only thing I run into sometimes is sometimes they take too long to decide
Oh yeah.
what they're going to
Oh
do
yeah.
next. How would you handle that situation?
So if I ever notice that my players are taking too long, um, I I introduce something because it breaks the monotony of it breaks the cycle, not the monotony, but it breaks the cycle, right? Because now there's something new. There's a new piece of information, or there's a new something that distracts them, right? That's what you need, is that you
Right.
need the distraction because they're getting too involved. So if they are taking too long to maybe it's perhaps, for example, session 3, and they're planning on how do we get in and slay the evil wizard? Like, what's our plan? And they're taking way too long. They have the semblance of the plan, like it's kind of there, but they keep getting off topic, or they're thinking too much, which could be an issue for a lot of players. Depends on
Right.
the type of players that you have, which is another thing that we could talk about if you want. Um, but what I would do is I would just be like, "All right, the tower starts to emit a bright green light," and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we gotta go now!"
We gotta
Like
go
that's
now. Oh yeah. Right. Yeah,
that right?
introduce the ticking time bomb always,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
no, we got to decide now. And it's like when you're right. They tend to only take long time deliberating if there's not something pressuring them to make a decision. They're going to just take
That's
forever as
that's
soon
the
as you
trick of
introduce that.
yeah, that's the of
Yeah,
information on time, right? Everything, every
very
every
good,
piece of
very good.
information has its place. So
That's right. Okay, well, yeah,
yeah.
actually, let's pivot to that. Let's talk about different player types. So even if you're a new DM, you're going to see right away these 4 or 5
Mhm.
people. They all
Yeah.
have different concepts of what they want to get out of the game, how they want to approach problem solving. It's
Uh-huh.
like you're like playing. You're an orchestra conductor almost as a DM, and people are playing completely. Someone might be playing like an electric guitar, and one person might be playing a clarinet, the other person's playing a sitar. Like what do I do with that,
Exactly.
right?
It's totally different vibes, right?
Right,
And part of being a dungeon master is coalescing everyone into a cohesive group,
right,
and getting everyone to work together, within reason, of course. And at least in the 2014 edition of D&D, um, page 6 of the Dungeon Master's Guide is probably the most important page in that book, because it tells you what kind of players there are, like the archetypes of different players, and it tells you what they need in order to keep them entertained, um, and which is all well and good, but I know that D&D isn't the only TTRPG out there. Nowadays we've got a whole bunch of awesome
right,
TTRPGs that are just
right,
everyone's dying to explore nowadays. And so those archetypes, they kind of exist in other TTRPGs, but not necessarily. So the question is, how do you look at players um, without the D&D lens? And so I kind of categorize my players now into four categories. And the reason why this came about, or how this came about, these four categories, is when I was DMing at the game reserve, I would get a random newbie, like someone who's just either they came from a new game store, from another game store, and they wanted to try this place out, and we're just looking for a new group, or they were brand new, and I needed to on the spot figure out what kind of player they were without about 5 or 6 seconds in to the game, so I knew how to handle them,
Mm,
because that's the job as a store DM, right? That you're
mm.
constant. So that's how that. So this is where those four categories came out. The four categories um,
Next question.
are highly active, active, passive, highly passive. And in my book, I do talk about it, and I think I've renamed them so that they're not a little, they're not so, like, you can delineate.
Mm,
Um, but the active and the passive are probably your two, like, they're the two in between, and you can definitely tell who's highly active or who's highly passive, because that's you're gonna know. You're
right.
gonna know if you have to think
Right.
about it. If you have to think about it, they're probably just active or passive. But
Right.
I think the example that I would give is, I think one of my players. There was a new player, and they or I had two new players come in one day, and I had mentioned that there was a mechanical dog there was a little girl, and she was playing with a mechanical dog. An active player is going to go and talk to the little girl or talk to the dog,
Right.
or attempt to, like, experiment with the dog, right?
Right.
The passive player is going to investigate the dog,
Right.
or they're gonna
Right.
look. They're gonna side eye the
Inspect it.
little girl. Right, they're
Right.
gonna inspect it. And so
Right.
so you have two very different types of players right there, and nice big broad categories, right? You
Right.
have people who are a little introspective, who
Right.
want to engage by listening, engage by figuring it out.
Right.
And then you have other players who are engaging with the story by actually going and doing the thing. Those are
Right.
your active players. Your highly active players are the players um, who are going to create their own things, right? They're not just engaging with
Right.
the story. They're going to go, I want to make a project. I want to create a new spell, and I'm going to go out. So how can we work on this? Do I need money? Do I need to go out and, like, get, like, herbs and ingredients? Do I need to, like, make my own, like, specific ink and parchment
Right.
to, like, craft this spell? Like that kind of stuff. That's your highly active player. Your highly passive player is the one who's not going to say a word. They
Right.
are You are going to engage with them, and they are going to respond, and that's it. They're not gonna go any further than you're gonna take it.
Mm.
And those are the four
So,
categories. The very broad categories, but everyone can fit into one of those four categories, rather than trying to figure out, okay, are they the type of player who loves combat?
right.
Well, yes, you can be the type of person who likes combat, but not every TTRPG has combat.
Right. Yeah, and then you probably shouldn't be playing the game if you're a player who likes combat, you should just decline to play the game that doesn't have combat. You would
Right,
think people
exactly.
would do
But
that,
that's
but
a
sometimes they
player
don't. Right, that's a play.
that's a that's a
Yeah,
player
that's a
that's a
player.
player thing,
That's
not a
right.
DM thing.
Okay, so it's a couple points that while I was
Hmm,
listening to you here. Yeah, Dungeon Masters. Read the Dungeon Masters guide. Read it, just
yeah,
start to finish. Take an evening.
mhm,
Pour yourself a drink. and just, go through it. There's so many dungeon masters who never read it. And it's,
Yeah.
the new version of it is nice. The old version of it is nice. It's just good solid advice if you've never done that.
Yeah.
And I'm just, it's not just the player's handbook is for the players. The dungeon master's guide is for dungeon masters. So it's always worth just sitting down, and it's, I don't know, 300 pages. Browse through it at the very least. But yeah, the first couple pages are enough if you're under the gun and you've got to play something in the next, week or so, and you don't have time to read the whole book. Just read the first chapter,
Yeah.
and you will find everything you need. Excuse me. The next thing is, okay. So let's imagine we've got these 4 or 5 players, completely diverse needs. How do you juggle it? This person wants combat. This person wants to role play their character with a backstory they've been thinking about for 5 years. This other one just wants to investigate. How do you make sure each one of them are satisfied?
Well, you give them the thing that satisfies them,
How do you make
right?
sure that, so one thing I run into is I tend towards combat and social. I'm not a good investigative DM. I'm not good at it. That's the one thing that I still, after all these years, but I have a player who likes it. And so I always worry that in the back of my head, I'm not giving them enough of they want, because that's not where my head is either.
Mm.
So, like, do you take notes and say, okay, I've done enough combat, or do you just kind of wing it and say, okay, now we need to dial down the combat? Like, how do you just double check and make sure that that's happening, and don't let your own biases get in the way?
Yeah, that's a good question. It feels like this question is very similar to, like, how do you bake something? Do you eyeball
Mm,
it or do you take measurements? And
right.
people are very different in that regard. For me,
Yeah.
I eyeball it. Um, it's all vibes for me.
Mm,
If I feel that, you know, one combat is enough, one combat is enough. Um, I do like a good mystery, so there's a lot of investigation checks and a lot of perception checks happening. There's a lot of little tidbits, right?
right.
And a lot of this comes down to, no matter whatever way you slice and dice it, a lot of it comes down to what information you're putting out on the table. Um, and by information, I just mean like details,
Mm,
or I mean whatever sentence you're gonna feed your players. For example, this door is made of solid stone and has a cast iron lock on it. Um, and it seems to be, and you could actually just end it there, but you could
right.
also say, well, it seems to be enchanted in nature. Well, either one of those is going to prompt an
Right.
investigation check, right? But if I just said that it was a stone door, and then I moved on to another thing. Oh, you see a stone door. Oh, and you also see a, you see also in this room that there is a red carpet that is, you know, finely decorated, and there's beautiful mahogany, tables and desks, and chairs. Looks like there's been a banquet, and you see out the window a starry night, and now you're getting into a lot of information for the players to process very quickly. There's a lot of stuff to investigate there, but if your goal was for them to investigate the door, you've done a
Mm,
very poor job because
mm,
you didn't make the door the focus,
mm,
right? So it's that. So if you're trying to get someone to investigate something, be very mindful of what you're describing and how long you're describing it for,
mm,
because that's gonna trigger the interest in, because basically the game is yes anding, right? Improv is yes and. Yes, I'm taking what you're saying and I'm building off of it. And so active players and to an extent passive players are looking for things. Every player is looking for something to interact with and looking for the thing that interests them the most to interact with. Um And so in that regard, you can kind of sweep everyone in that field. If you've got if you have someone who enjoys combat, for instance, you might want to start describing a you describe a rough and tumble, NPC who looks like they're ready to brawl, or you might describe that really shady character in the corner who's watching you very closely, right? And only describe it to like this is something that only that one character sees, so that they
Right.
can keep their eye out on that character, prepping for the combat, waiting for that moment, so that they're in that mindset, they're in that combat mindset, but their combat hasn't started. So you've already
Right.
engaged them. And so it's always there's always a way to engage with information, and how you give that information when you give that information.
Right. Let's talk about dice rolls a little bit too.
Okay.
So we're talking about investigation. This is something that I used to struggle with a lot, which is when you're doing an investigation, you have to make it an investigation check. There are some clues. What if everybody fails their rolls? Like, what do you do? Like, you see nothing in this room. Game over.
Yeah.
Like, right?
Game over.
What do you do? You could run into that. So let's talk about just that specific scenario, and then let's move into talking about how we need to be thinking about the dice rolls in general.
Sure, absolutely. So I think that's common DM advice is don't lock anything behind a roll specifically, unless you want to. But if there's a critical piece of information, like you're imagining that there's this note that actually tells the location of the princess,
Right.
and it's in a locked drawer, and everyone fails the lock picking check. Well, now it's locked there forever, and they have no idea.
Right. Yeah, what are you gonna do?
So there's two ways to go about this, right? You either make the information flexible. So perhaps it's that location is actually tattooed on the body of a mercenary, and they just happen to, when they get into combat and they kill that mercenary, it's on their body for some reason. You can make it flexible,
Hmm.
um, and that way there's always the possibility that they find it, and it just happens that they find it in a different way.
Hmm.
Or you do the smart thing and you don't lock it behind a skill check.
Right.
And if it's a critical piece of information, they just find it.
They just find it.
The
Yeah.
I think the balance here's the real question. When you don't hide it behind a skill check, the question is, did they earn it? Did they earn
Mm.
that information? And this is where you can get into how dice and why dice play a role in TTRPGs, right? I'm of the mindset that dice play a fundamental role in the storytelling, because if you can just snap your fingers and say that something happened, everyone's the dungeon master. I mean, there's always you can always DMs can always invite their player to, hey, what's the name of this NPC, or what's the name of this tavern, or what town are we located in, or what town do you go to next, right? Those things, right?
Right.
Um, or you always get those silly spats where you like there's some joke thing, and then someone's like, "That's canon now. That's canon now," right? And of course, then you ask them to prove it, and they roll a nat 20 on you, and you're like, "I guess it's canon
Right.
now." But um, besides that, from a fundamental point of view, the dice are critical because they add the what if factor.
Right.
There's not 100% guarantee that this thing exists,
Right.
or that what you do succeeds or fails, right? Because if I say there is a cliff and you say I jump off of it, that's that. I mean, you can say that, but then if you decide that you want to, like, oh, I'm gonna catch that root and hang off the side like cliffhanger from Between the Lions,
Right.
right? And you're struggling and you're holding there, and you just say that you hold it. Well, there's no risk.
Right.
there's no risk there. You're just holding on to this one thing as opposed to, let's add in a dice roll. Well, now there's tension.
Right.
All of the sudden, there's tension. And you have no idea. I mean, you have stats that help you, right? That add to your roll. But the very sense that there's a dice roll there
Mhm.
adds the what if factor, which
Right.
is that's the whole premise, right? Nothing in life is absolutely certain, and there's always the ability to try harder or fail,
Right.
and that's how the dice function. And so the question is do you, when you allow the information to just be out there and in the open and not hidden behind a skill roll, did they really earn it?
Mm.
And you as a dungeon master have to find a way to either justify whatever decision you make.
Mm.
Perhaps they've defeated in combat, the mercenaries hired by the evil wizard.
Mm.
Um, and when going through their pockets without need of a dice roll, because of course um, they've just defeated these guys, so why not give them the loot for free?
Mm.
Um, that they find a letter that tells you exactly where the princess is.
So now they've earned it still, but you didn't lock it behind you didn't lock it behind a dice roll.
Yeah,
Very,
exactly.
very clever. Yeah.
Yep.
So
And why not? Sorry, but why not
okay.
do both things? Why not both make the information flexible and
Right.
behind a skill check,
Right.
right? Or I should say, and not behind a skill check, right? If
Right.
you can find a way to, again, change how that information is presented. It doesn't have to be a letter, doesn't have to be a tattoo on someone. It could be a vision, right? The
Yeah.
god of the world is sending the cleric a vision of where the princess is, and they have to decipher it. They
Mm.
have to decipher the vision. Well, you could build a puzzle around that that does not necessarily require a skill check, and now it's up to the player to solve that. But at the same time, that information also exists as the letter tucked inside that pocket. So now there's two ways to get that information. And maybe there's a third piece where again there's another letter hidden in a wardrobe or a desk that is hidden behind a skill check that's somewhere else. So if the combat doesn't happen and they still go, now you have three pieces. So there's multiple different ways, and you can always find a way to give them the information in whatever way is possible.
Very good.
Uh, yeah.
So it just occurred to me though. I think I can guess your answer to this. Where are
Oh
you
no.
out on fudging dice rolls?
Ah, fudging dice rolls. So yes, I am a big proponent of fudging dice rolls. I shouldn't
Really?
say a big proponent of fudging dice rolls. Yeah. Oh, I surprised you on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll fudge.
I was gonna expect the opposite of that actually.
No,
Um,
I'm okay with fudging a dice roll here and there. Um, in terms of if it adds flavor to the story. If I'm using it against my players, absolutely not. No, 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 no,
right,
no, no.
right,
But if you were going to let's say the you've been rolling really well and you're about to down a party member, well, you can fudge a dice roll and they stay up. But that adds tension because they were just about to go down and now they're not.
now they're
Right? But in reality, they you actually downed them and they actually went unconscious. In certain scenarios like that, I think that's acceptable, and you could also do the reverse if you wanted to. If you were rolling really poorly, and you really wanted to down a player and they were a couple hit points away, you could be like, "Oh, I rolled a 6." And they're like, that's the exact
right.
life total, or like I had 5 hit points,
Yeah, change the difficulty class. Don't change change the DC of what was happening instead of,
Yeah.
change what the
Yeah,
result of the.
exactly.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, it was a 12, not a 14. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're good.
And some people are like, "Well, you're lying to your players."
Mm.
And to that I say, you're playing a game of make believe anyway. You're lying to your players when you withhold information from them,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like when you're not telling them where, like when the NPC is not telling them where the um like any NPC, they could walk up to a random, you know, like clerk,
Right.
and be like, "Where's the evil wizard?" And they
Yeah.
technically know because you know, but
Right.
logically they don't. But you're withholding that information. Like so, in the same way, like you can fudge a dice roll here and there if it means adding something to the story, but you should never
Mm.
use it against your players in a way that's like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
facetious. That's
Very. It's
that's
very
that's ill.
reasonable.
That's ill intent, right? If you
Right.
have good intent, like if
Right.
you have good intentions, like like
Right.
totally cool with it. I don't do it
Yeah.
often. I don't do it
Yeah.
often,
That's
but
a, yeah.
if
It's
the
a
moment,
very
if the
surgical.
moment, yeah, if the moment requires it,
Yeah.
yeah,
For me, I'm almost never these days.
yeah,
I used to do it frequently for the reasons that you're saying, is to help along the narrative or do something. I need them to get somewhere. I'm trying to save them from dying because they really like
hmm,
their character. I used
yeah,
to do that a lot. I actually do it less. But here's the trick: is that it just depends on the group of players. If I have a group of players that I know are on board with that and say, I'm never going to fudge my dice no matter what happens, and I tell them ahead of time and they agree to it, then it's all good. If it's another case where it's like a group of new players, they're
yeah,
going to feel bad. I don't want them to feel bad. I don't want
right,
them to
of
feel
course,
bad. It just depends on who you're playing with, is really
right.
what it comes down to for me.
And you
Yeah.
can always, if you are uncomfortable with the notion, but still want to use it, you can always have that conversation with your players. I would say
Mm.
that most players are cool with it. If you describe to them that it's a surgical tool, it's not a,
Right.
you know,
Like, I'm not always going to be doing this.
right. It's
How much do you
because then you
hide
are
your
then you are cheating, you know.
right? This is basically like, why? What are we even doing here,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That might point.
Do you hide your roles? Do you hide them behind a screen, or do
I
you keep them in
do,
front?
I do for the most part. I do. Um, and I think when people discuss this, they usually bring up Brendan Lee Mulligan's Box of Doom,
Right.
right? Or Tower of Doom or whatever he calls it. Because that's like, here's the role that's in front of everybody. Um, but he typically reserves that for his players. What I think adds more tension is when you are using the screen and then you roll in, then you're like, I'm gonna roll this in front, and whatever's gonna be is gonna be, because then everyone knows this is for real.
Mm.
Like this is it, and
This is going to be. This
they
is
can peer
happening.
behind. Right, exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Especially if you have that discussion ahead of time, where it's like, hey, I'm gonna use fudging to of course, just a couple of times here and there. I'll never tell you when. It'll always come at a point that feels natural, like
Right.
that kind of stuff. They have that discussion with them, and then when you roll in front of them, they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is intense."
Right. Very good. I want to shift gears a little bit with the time that we have remaining.
Sure.
We were talking about, we primarily talk about D&D. I think on social media people talk about D&D because we all talk about D&D. So it's like this sort of, it's sorry it's this sort of, it's a sort of self-fulfilling circle that we get
Mhm.
into. And I've noticed in this this last couple months, and I think it's because of Daggerheart, not the game itself specifically, is because it's the people behind it have the attention of so many people that there is a crack that is happening in the zeitgeist right now. I like
Mhm.
2024. I think it's pretty fun. I love the weapon masteries. I don't have anything against D&D. I'll always play in D&D, but it
Mhm.
just seems like in the whole community, everyone is open to trying a new game of some
Yeah.
kind. If it's not Daggerheart, it's something else. But there has been this kind of big shift this year, and I think it's good for everybody to try it out. So I want a couple kind of questions all rolled in together. Is do you play other games? Have you played other games? Are there other games that out there that you'd like to try that you haven't yet?
Yeah. So I have played other ones. there's some very interesting ones that I've played. I think my favorite. So I'll talk about my favorite. I'll talk about a very interesting one that I played that's kind of not, I don't want to say out there, but different, definitely. And then one that I haven't played that I want to.
Okay.
Um, so I played Blades in the Dark,
Oh.
and I don't know if you've played that at all yet.
I
I
bought the book and I'm about to.
absolutely
Yep.
love that. Oh, it was so good, and
Yeah.
I got to play. I DM'd once, and my players weren't like my friends weren't particularly into it, which was kind of unfortunate. So I don't have a play group
Um,
for that. But when I was playing in it, oh, what a fantastic system! What a great system! And the character like archetypes and your different points and the fact that you can a big selling point on it for me is that you don't have to discuss anything. You just go right into the mission.
mm,
So what we were talking about, where there's a huge wait time, doesn't exist.
you just
You go right into
hit.
there's two very distinct phases where D&D is more of the okay, there's combat and then there's this role playing free play sense and it sort of
Right.
weaves in and out and you can kind of, spin things around. This is very like mission, downtime. Mission, downtime. It's very distinct. And I do kind of like that. It's a very different feel. It's very nitty gritty because it's like post apocalyptic, but still
Right.
fantasy. And oh, it's very good. It's a very good game. The more interesting one that I've played is Microscope. Are you familiar?
No, I have not heard of that.
So Microscope is considered the people who wrote it consider it a TTRPG. I so I will consider it a TTRPG. It is not a TTRPG that you have ever played before because you do not necessarily play as a character.
What do you
You don't
play as?
nothing. So you create a couple of NPCs and you can create NPCs here and there, but it's a history TTRPG where you are examining the lens of a timeline. You are
Huh.
creating the history of a world with your with the other players. And there's no dungeon master or game master per se. That there is one person and it rotates around who has sort of the lens, who is the
Right.
lens, and they get to choose something that they want to focus on for
Right.
that particular thing. And so they could say, I want to, and they because there's no dice rolls. Again, what we talked about, you can snap your fingers and you can just make something exist.
Mm.
Um, but you do have to. There are things you have to talk about. Okay, well, this is. I'm going to create this kingdom that exists in this timeline of the history of this empire. So maybe it starts out as a kingdom. All right. Well,
Right.
and it is a monarchy, and it does this and this and this. And you
Right.
can there's different parameters that you can use and all that stuff. And you're like, and then the next person can be like, I'm gonna focus specifically like I'm gonna create a king, and
Right.
we're gonna look at this king, and maybe you and someone else create an NPC to for you and that king to talk together and role play out one scene, and so then
Mm.
there's that, and then the next person can come along and be like, I am going to kill that
That's really
king right
cool.
now. But so then the next person can be like, well, in between the assassination and this, there's been 30 years. And
Oh,
you can and so you can
that's
stretch or
really interesting.
elongate or shorten the timeline. It's very interesting. It is
Very
such a
interesting.
cool world building tool.
Yeah.
That's how I wanna use it, and I have used it before. I did, like, one session with a group of friends and made, like, a quick timeline, like a history, and everyone gets a say in the timeline, and it's
Right.
very cool. It's very interesting.
Very cool. Yeah. Okay. It's
Mhm.
called Microscope.
Microscope. Microscope, yep.
Okay.
Very it's a very small it's like a little black book, it's about this thin.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
great. It's
I love it.
very, very cool.
It's
Absolutely
really cool.
fantastic game. You
Cool.
do need I would say it probably plays better online than it does in person, to be
Oh,
completely honest, I think, because it keeps because you can organize things better online rather than on paper.
cool, cool.
The last thing, is, the one that I really wanna play, which is called Outgunned.
I have not
Uh,
heard of that
Out
either.
Outgunned, I actually just went to PAX East because I live here, on the East Coast, so I went to, PAX East in Boston. And one of the games that they were showcasing, I forget the name of the company, was Outgunned. And the way they sold me on it was it is a TTRPG that is designed like John Wick or James Bond or, one of those like high action packed movies,
Right.
A Team, that whole thing.
You're
Oh, and
an elite
it
team of
looks so
badasses. Yeah,
exactly, going off on a mission,
right.
and I
That sounds
love that
amazing.
vibe.
Yeah,
Mhm,
me
and they
too.
had
Oh, that sounds incredible. Wait,
I
so
got the
is it
regular
like
version.
hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was wondering if it's more like, like Blades in the Dark where, like, you come in and here's your mission and just go? Or is it or
No,
there's more.
it does no, it does play as a little bit more like D&D where there is a bit of combat but the combat's totally different as far as I can tell. It's a D6 system, so
Mhm.
it doesn't use anything, it doesn't use any of the other 6 dice. Um
That sounds cool.
Oh, no, it's
Yeah,
great, it's great. It has this
that
cool,
sounds very
like,
cool.
outrun mechanic where you
Nice.
can, like, speed away from people, and there's a speed thing, there's things you can do increase the throttle of your car, and, like, chase
Yeah.
sequences. Oh, that the chase sequence in there is something I will if I can't find a group of consistent players to play that game, I'm totally stealing it for
I
D&D.
have heard about this, and it was from you. You were talking about this on your TikTok, weren't you? The you said that it
I
was
was
one of
very
the best
excited.
chase systems that you've ever seen. Yeah,
Mhm.
we're gonna have to take a look
Well,
at that in more
we
depth.
can play it. Yeah, we can
We
play
should
it.
do that. All
Absolutely.
right. Very cool. All right.
We're on for
Well,
that.
I want to first, thank you so much for taking the time. I'd love to have you back, and anytime we
Absolutely.
have some topic that we'd like to dig into together, you are more than welcome. I'd love to have you back. And if there's any final words you'd like to leave for new dungeon masters
Oh, new
before we
dungeon
sign
masters.
off.
I don't know. I'm all chatted out. I don't know if
Chat it out. Okay,
I don't
fair
I
enough.
well
It's like-
not chatted out. Just like I like there's so much stuff going through my head right now. I don't
right,
even know
right,
what
right,
other tip I could
right.
give. But
I would.
I will say thank you so much for the opportunity of being
Yeah, no
here. It
problem.
was absolutely fantastic. What a
No
great time.
problem.
You're such a great host. And I really look forward. I absolutely want to do this again. It's so
Absolutely
great.
cool.
And
Very cool.
I will say this that there's you started off the night by saying this, or I shouldn't say night because it's day for you over where you are. But you started off
Right.
this video talking about there's no right way, there's no
That's
right
right.
or wrong way, and that stays true. So what we talk about here might not work for you as a new dungeon master, for you new dungeon masters watching this. It might not work. It's they're concepts, they're ideas that we talk about because they're what works for us. And that goes back to, you know, you can try all you want to be Brennan Lee Mulligan. You can try all you want to be Matt Mercer or Zeke Lewis or Aaron Dale, or, it doesn't, you
Right.
can, at the end of the day, it's what works best for you makes you the DM that you are. And
Great.
that's the most important part.
Perfect words to leave it off. Thank you very much, and we're looking forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much.